Greetings, Healthy Voice Notes listeners. Today, I want to talk about social anxiety and how it affects the voice. But then I really want to focus on how we can actually use the voice that is very much affected by this social anxiety to heal the anxiety. A lot of this comes from something known as polyvagal theory. And I'm going to avoid using all the terminology that come from this theory because I find these types of terms to be really confusing. We can say the same types of ideas in everyday terms that just about anybody can relate to. And so instead of being like a teacher speaking to her students, why don't I just start with sharing from some of my own experience? So I was ready to admit that I had social anxiety back when I was around 28 years old. I had been dealing with social anxiety for quite some time, but I covered it up pretty easily because I had this performance background. I had become a trained performer. And so I knew what the character of someone comfortable at parties looked like. And I was able to channel that kind of character every time I went to a party or to some kind of an event where there would be a lot of people. But the truth was that the idea of going would begin the anxiety. I would begin the anxiety process days before the event. And the hours leading up to the event would fill me with a type of fear and dread that was very difficult for me to explain at the time. I couldn't discuss it with anybody because if I tried to, people would look at me like I was crazy. Every time I ever tried to hint that there was something going on with me, that I needed some kind of help, people would look at me like I wondered if maybe they thought I was trying to get attention because they would look at me like, "What are you talking about?" Sometimes people would say to me, "You're the most together person I know, and you're the most confident person I know." And I understood why they were saying that because, like I said, I was a really good actor. I had learned how to channel the person at a party who's totally comfortable. But that getting that kind of reaction from people actually made me feel worse because then I felt like a fraud. So I felt like not only am I afraid to go out and be around big social situations, but now I'm actually really embarrassed to admit that I've been lying to people essentially this whole time. So, okay, 28 years old, going to parties, realizing I have a problem. So I start doing intense breath work and sound healing sessions on myself about an hour before I have to leave. And that helped, but it didn't fix everything. A few years later, I would leave a situation where a relationship that I was in, and I've talked about it before on this podcast, it was a very unhealthy relationship where I was being controlled and I was having to live somebody else's life basically. All the time pretending like it was something I wanted to do, pretending to be okay with everything that was happening, in a lot of ways convincing myself. And so when I left that situation, I decided that the first thing I was going to change in my life was the honesty factor. I was realizing that the reason I couldn't get any help from people is because I had been putting on a show for so long. No wonder nobody wanted to help me. No wonder people thought that I was just trying to get attention because they saw me as one way, but really I was somebody else inside. I was a very scared person. I was very scared of people's judgments and making a fool of myself essentially. So instead of me trying to define social anxiety, let me give you a loose definition based on my own personal experience. And then you can contribute to this by sharing in the comments section the way you have experienced social anxiety. So to me, social anxiety is when you're around people and the people are the triggers for your fear. And the fear is very much rooted in survival because it's related to an ancient wisdom, an ancient knowledge that we need people to survive. And if the tribe kicks you out, you die. So there's a very real need to feel accepted by people, by the community. And so, if you have social anxiety and you go to a party or even just going to work every day, you can become flooded with fear hormones because there's something inside of you that dreads the possibility that you may be rejected by everybody. But the fear underlying that is actually a fear of death. I know it sounds dramatic, but why else would you be afraid of that? It wasn't until I started developing my own sense of sovereignty and claiming my voice as my own, claiming my own personality as my own unique expression, and feeling totally confident in that, that I started to really understand that social anxiety is very much rooted in a primitive fear of survival, of not being able to survive if the community rejects you. But then once you start to develop your sovereignty and you start to develop a real sense of self-worth and therefore confidence in who you are and a comfort in expressing yourself authentically, then that anxiety starts to lose its power. That fear stops showing up because it has nothing to feed off of. And I've talked about this before about how this can affect the voice. And so you may have noticed that when you are feeling some kind of social anxiety, your voice may tighten up, the pitch may get higher. You may even go into something that's known as upspeak. Upspeak is whenever you end your sentences with question marks and everything goes up a little bit. And it's not a trend, it's not a cultural thing. Like a lot of people think that this is some kind of generational habit, and perhaps it is linked to a certain generation or two, but it's really rooted in a fear of offending people, a fear. Upspeak tends to be a tactic, often a subconscious tactic, by the way. So if this is something you do, I'm in no way, I'm not saying that you are doing it on purpose. I think it's a subconscious pattern. Upspeak or speaking in a high pitch is it's a way of signaling to the other person, don't get mad now. It's a form of protection. It's a form of armor. It's not a good habit though. And it is not, like I said, it's an unconscious pattern. So it's not something that you're aware of doing. It can sometimes signal, it can work for certain people who like it when you appease them and they're in the mood for that kind of appeasement. It can also signal the wrong message to the wrong people. So sometimes you can get really manipulative people who you're actually trying to prevent them from getting angry with you, but they'll actually see that as a weakness and they might go after you even harder, which is one of the many complicated reasons why I push this idea of vocal sovereignty and reclaiming your true voice and learning how to own your authentic expression, learning how to speak in a dignified manner that doesn't diminish who you are, learning how to say what you really think, how you really feel about things, but in a way that respects the other person's sovereignty, the other person's dignity, but doesn't signal to them that you're here to appease them. It's a lot of work. It's a big it, it's a process. When I say that I realized I had social anxiety when I was 28, that was a long time ago. So I've had many, many years to work with this information and learn how to be comfortable with myself. So the reason why your voice changes and your voice can actually help you relax your nervous system, it's tied to the vagus nerve. And so this is where polyvagal theory comes in. So the vagus nerve is one of our cranial nerves. It begins in the back of the brain and it goes into the face, it goes down the neck and the throat, and then it connects to the lungs, the heart, the stomach. And you may have heard that the stomach and the heart contain their own nervous systems. So essentially, it's like we have three brains. We tend to focus mostly on the brain in our head, but that's only one nervous system. Our heart has its own nervous system, and our gut has its own nervous system. That's why you may have heard the term the mind gut connection. That's because of the vagus nerve. So, whenever you have anything connected to a nerve is kind of like a highway, a highway that's connecting one town to the next town, or a freeway or an interstate, depending on where you live, whatever you call it, connecting state to state, which I actually kind of like that because the double entendre for state is also state of mind, the mental state. And so you have the state of your brain, the nervous system in your brain, and then you have the state of your lungs and your heart and your stomach, all connected by this one pathway, this one interstate, this highway, this freeway. And so, whatever happens to one part of this pathway along the way of this vagus nerve is going to send messages and vibrations to the other parts. So, if since the vagus nerve runs along the pathway of the throat, that means that every time you make a sound, it's sending a signal throughout this entire highway of the vagus nerve. It's sending messages to the brain, to the lungs, to the heart, to the stomach. And we have some control over this. So, the first thing we have to learn to do is to realize when we are in some kind of a stress response, a fear response. And sometimes the first clue can be your voice. So, when you notice that your voice is getting very tight all of a sudden, that's your signal that you have been triggered into some kind of an anxiety state. And so you could just try to will yourself out of it, but it's not going to work. And this is the problem, in my opinion, with talk therapy. It's also the problem with all the other therapies that we use that are really good for practicing calm nervous system states. Things like I'm talking about meditation, yoga, cold plunges, walking, visualization. All of these things are really helpful, as is talk therapy, but they're not going to help you when you're in the middle of a fear response because you can't think your way out of a fear response. Because what happens when your fear sense gets triggered, when you are flooded with fear hormones, because of that vagus nerve, all of this fear information is being sent to everything. So now your lungs are constricting because that's also along the polyvagal highway. And then your stomach clenches up. And so now you can't breathe. Now you're feeling discomfort in your stomach, possibly. And for some of us, we get headaches. Not surprising since there's the brain area involved as well. But in the very moment that you're experiencing this fear response, one of the first things that happens is your breath becomes constricted. All of this activity causes your throat to tighten up. Remember, the vagus nerve also crosses the throat area. So, your first clue that you're in a fear response is that your throat becomes tight and you find it difficult to speak with ease. You may even have trouble finding the words. You may have a freeze response that makes it almost impossible to make sound. That's a thing. So, when that happens, you've got to find a way to make some sound. And the easiest thing you can turn to is humming. You just start humming. The mouth can be closed, it can be very quiet. So, especially if you're at a party, nobody can hear you humming. Or you can do what I like to do. Before you walk into any social situation, start humming. From the moment you leave your car or the train or the street corner, wherever it is you're coming from, as you get closer to that destination, start humming. And then throughout the event, whenever you have moments of privacy or moments where nobody can hear you, hum some more. What humming does is it sends a vibration through that vagus nerve, through that nervous system highway. And the humming is like a massage. It's a massage for your nervous system, and it puts your nervous system at ease. And so, just the act of humming is going to start to relax your body and relax your mind so that you can finally remember, oh, I need to take a deep breath. So, what you might want to do is get into a habit of humming before you go to work, or pick another situation that you do every single day so that you can start to train yourself to do this every time you go into a social situation. Just before you get inside the building, start humming. Or if it's a Zoom meeting, give yourself 10 minutes of humming before the meeting begins and notice the difference in your body. Notice the difference in your voice. Okay, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. It was inspired by my latest YouTube video where I actually do a toning exercise coupled with a visualization that I guide you through to help you through these scary social situations. I know a lot of you deal with social anxiety. I know how painful it is, and I know how debilitating it is. That's the worst part, is how it holds you back from fulfilling your goals and your dreams. And I know a lot of you out there listening to this, you have big dreams, you have a lot of talent, and you have a lot of gifts to offer the world. But your fear of people has held you back from going towards these goals or maybe just completing them. And so go check out that video, start incorporating this humming practice, try the exercise in the video, start incorporating this visualization, this toning, this humming practice into your life, and start to change the way your nervous system responds to anxiety. Because I truly believe it every single time I say it, the world needs your unique voice. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. I'll talk to you in the next podcast.